Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glen Sutherland.
Hello and welcome to another episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, I just wanted to talk about how to take an average deal and turn it into a great deal. Really defining for yourself what a good deal is or what your goal is really the first step to figuring out what you need to do in order to get there. I've come up with a pile of different ways you could turn your deal into a better deal. And here they are in no particular order. The first way to do this would be to renovate your property. This might seem like a really obvious answer, but it may not actually be the answer that you're looking for in order to make it a better deal. Often when you're going through and do a full renovation of the property, it often really doesn't change the price of the rent you're going to get. There's really a cap for what the neighborhood you're in. If your goal is just to get a higher cash flow, one way you may be able to do it is just by finding different financing for your property and using an interest-only method. That way, you'll be paying a lot less per month because you're not paying down any of the actual loan, but your cash flow will actually increase and you'll be able to put more money in your pocket. Another way you can do this is to renegotiate your taxes. If you have a property that you've held for a long period of time, you may be getting to the end of the depreciation cycle. If you get a property that doesn't have a lot of depreciation left, you may just want to swap it for a property that does have the ability to keep depreciating. In Canada, if you want to do this, you're going to pay capital gains, but in the States, there's a thing called 1031 exchange where you can swap the property for another property of like as long as it's more expensive, and you go through a 1031 exchange company. If you can get over the idea that if someone's willing to rent a property for, say, $1,500 a month, they'd probably be willing to buy the property and make payments of $1,500 a month. What's interesting about this is if you think about it, if you subtract off the property taxes that you're actually paying, if you put your properties into a mortgage calculator and did the whole process backwards, so you know what the final number of what they have per month, and you subtract off the property taxes and you subtract off the insurance, and then to come up with what the price of the house actually is based on an interest rate that's comparable for the market, you'll find that the property would sell for much higher than you actually purchased it for, which may be a way to get out of the property and actually get the money come out of the property slowly to minimize capital gains. Another way to add value to the property may be to rent a garage. Another obvious one would be to renovate the basement into a separate unit. These permits are getting easier to get, but it's a lot of work to do the actual renovation. I know you can go and sub it out and get someone to do it all, but that really will cut into your profit margin. You can rent by the room. So there's student housing, there's like boarding houses, there's just places to just rent by the room. Cash flow on that will be much higher, but I believe you're going to have a lot more tenant problems. From my personal experiences dealing with a duplex, you're going to have tenants just in the one side of the duplex to the other side complaining about each other. I can't imagine people in the next room or sharing a kitchen not calling you about some issues. Another way to do it would be to create another room. People will pay more for a 3-bedroom than a 2. Sometimes you can do that by just converting like an attic space or a porch or doing an actual addition. Another way could be to change the term of the mortgage. You could extend the term, you could lower the interest rate, or you could just refinance right out of the property. If you're the type of investor who's doing renovations to the properties, another way you could actually save yourself some money is instead of borrowing through a traditional loan is to switch it to a line of credit. The actual advantage is when your money is not being used in an actual project, you're not paying interest on it, so you can pay back the line of credit and then not pay any interest for that period of time, which actually makes it so you could actually afford a higher interest rate because the actual amount of payments you're going to make across a year is going to be lower. Another option you could try would be to pay off the mortgage. You could rejig your portfolio. If you find that you have like a whole bunch of equity, like little pieces of equity in each house, you might be able to move it around so that actually one property is paid off, which would move up your cash flow because the one property you wouldn't be making a mortgage payment on and the other ones would still be the same mortgage payment. Another idea would be to add another house on the same lot. I've looked at properties and they're like on corner lots, and because of that, you could actually be on a side street, and if they have a large enough lot, you may be able to add another property behind them. Sometimes you can put a property beside them. It does involve a lot of permits, or basically you could just buy a tiny house and put it on the property. Another idea may be to make the tenants responsible for more things. So if you have, say, a duplex or a multiplex where you're paying the utilities, one way to save money may be to split the hydro, split the gas, have them shovel the snow, cut the grass. You may be able to put up a fence between the units. That way the tenants will know that like this part of the yard is theirs to cut and this part of the yard is the other person's to cut. If you are paying all the utilities and you're still going to be paying all the utilities, one other way may be to just add low-flow toilets, low-flow shower heads, smarter meters for hydro and temperature, sensors that turn off the air conditioning when the screen door is open. You could add a coin laundry. You could add laundry to a unit and raise the rent. When a tenant turnover is happening, another idea you could do would be to remove things that could break. I've seen where people will take the dishwasher out of a unit and then just replace it with like cabinet doors so that there's one less thing that they would have to fix. Depending on the market, you may be able to remove the stove, fridge, washer, and dryer, and then the tenants would be responsible to bring their own appliances into the unit. Another way I just recently discovered would be just to rejig some closing credits you have whenever you're closing a property. For instance, if you're planning on buying multiple houses, often the turnkey provider will offer a discount. So, for instance, say you're buying 2 properties and they give you a $10,000 discount. Instead of just taking the $10,000 off the top, so if it's hey, let's go for a nice even number. Say you're buying a property that's $100,000. So instead of taking $5,000 off of each property and making them each $95,000 and then calculating your mortgage and everything else after that based on that number, instead pay them for the $100,000 or start with that at the top, work through, figure out the mortgage, figure out everything, and at the very bottom, put the $5,000 closing credit in. What that does is if you were responsible for 20% of the mortgage, by putting the $5,000 at the bottom of the closing credit, you're actually responsible for $15,000, which would be 15% down. So it's just an easy way to put more leverage on the property. Anyway, thanks for your time, guys. That's my quick list of some ways. If you're watching this on YouTube, please go ahead and add your own little comments on what other ideas you've come up with. Thanks.